You're listening to Voices of Leadership, presented by Funk Associates.
Dr. Bobby Robbins is our guest today. Bobby has recently completed a 7-year tenure as the president of the University of Arizona. This coming after a remarkable career in cardiothoracic medicine. Prior to the University of Arizona, he served as president and CEO of the Houston Medical Center, and earlier was chair of the Department of Thoracic Medicine at Stanford University. We are delighted to discuss his successful career as he moved from world-renowned heart surgeon to university president, and of course, the tenets of leadership he developed and followed during his journey through these various roles. Bobby, welcome to our podcast. This will be fun because we've been friends for a long time, but I know that you have a lot of knowledge to impart to our listenership. You have an impressive and unique personal story, one that ultimately led you from your grandparents' home in Laurel, Mississippi, to consideration as one of the leading heart surgeons in the world, to most recently the presidency of the University of Arizona. I wonder if you would share your story with our listeners and bring us up to date to what you are doing today.
Well, Bill, it's an honor to be with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you, which I think is really important. You've had an impressive list of guests that I've listened to from your podcast, and I just appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you. First of all, I'm better at telling, making short stories long than making long stories short, but just as my maternal grandparents raised me in Ellisville, Mississippi, the home of Jones Junior College. It's still called a junior college today. And my grandfather was a math teacher there for almost 50 years, retired in 1972. I think he was making about $7,000 a year, somewhere in that range. But I got to run that campus and sit in a tree and listen to biology lectures and watch him give math lectures. And the Jones Junior College Bobcats were the 1968 National Junior College Football Championship. And I went to all of their practices and all this stuff. So it helped to form my life's journey of how important education is. I would say my grandfather worked in a cotton gin at night on the 11 to 7 shift, and then drove back and got his master's degree from University of Southern Mississippi, where in our day Ray Guy played, and of course Brett Favre, and he had 3 brothers, and he put 3 of his nieces through nursing school, and they all lived in the house. It was absolutely the perfect environment to grow up and be exposed to the value of education. From there, I went off, thought I was going to be a football player at Ole Miss, but you've seen me. I'm not big enough to play in the SEC. But when you're a quarterback in Mississippi, you think you're going to be the next Archie Manning. But luckily, due to an injury, I went to a small liberal arts college called Millsaps College and got a great education that prepared me well for medical school. Went to Ole Miss Medical School right across the street in Jackson, and had just numerous mentors, including James D. Hardy, who was the chair of surgery, who did the true first heart transplant in the world in 1964 in Jackson, Mississippi. He took a chimpanzee heart and put into a human. And then Arthur C. Guyton, who had, I think it was 9 or 10 children. All of them went to Ole Miss because it was free, and all went to Harvard Medical School except one. She got a PhD at Duke, and they were enormous influences upon me. When I went to Dr. Hardy and said, I want to go be a heart surgeon, he said, young man, there's only one place you can go, work with Norman Shumway at Stanford. So I made my way to Stanford after spending time at the NIH and Columbia, and did my cardiac surgery training. And Was fortunate enough to be part of the faculty starting in 1992, worked my way up through the ranks to a tenured professorship, and the third chair of the department and the founding director of the Stanford Cardiovascular Institute. And from there, in 2012, I moved to Houston, which you know well, the largest medical center in the world, Texas Medical Center, which has MD Anderson, Baylor College of Medicine, Rice University, Texas A&M, UT, all working together, and was the president and CEO there until I was recruited to University of Arizona in 2017 to serve as the president. And I just finished that term October 1st of this year. And now I'm back full circle on the farm at Stanford as a distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institute. So that's a long way from Ellisville, Mississippi, Bill.
You betcha. The theme of this podcast series is focused on leadership. I think it would be interesting to probe your thoughts about how your leadership approach evolved or changed as you moved through those several positions that you've enumerated. And I'm just curious, as you've progressed through these different roles, what leadership principles have you developed and followed? How would you describe your leadership approach at the University of Arizona?
I think it starts with being a great listener. There are so many, as I progressed through the different leadership roles I've had, it got more complex every time. Now, I learned a lot from these mentors that I had, Dr. Hardy, Dr. Guyton, Dr. Shumway, and others at Stanford. And going from being a trainee at an institution to the third ever leader of the world-recognized Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Stanford, that may have been one of the tougher assignments I've had, because now you're leading the people who trained you, and you know, cardiac surgeons are very strong personalities and opinionated and obviously very talented. But I learned to be a good listener because there's so many stakeholders, particularly as a university president. You've obviously got the students, the faculty, the enormous staff. And I would just say at University of Arizona, we had one of the greatest faculties in the world, really, particularly in those things like astronomy and lunar and planetary science, optical science, hydrology. There are so many things that the faculty was great at. But you can't have a great university without great staff supporting those prestigious faculty members. And then there are the alumni, the donors. Many of our donors in Tucson actually didn't go to the University of Arizona, but adopted us. And at a large public land grant, AAU University, obviously elected officials, the city council, the mayor, the board of supervisors, the governor, the legislature, our board of regents, which is a board, as you know, oversees both Arizona State University, Northern Arizona University, and the University of Arizona. And then there's the community at large, because you know, the taxpayers pay taxes that support public universities. So you have to listen and understand the positions on these complex issues that face higher education today, and start by being a good listener. Get a great team, recruit a great team, empower them. You know, as Dr. Shumway used to say, we needed to hire, the next person needed to be more talented than all of us and bring something new to the table, and we'll support them and steal their slides and brag about them. So you got to have great people that surround you, and then have a collaborative approach to making decisions. Get as many opinions as you can, listen to them, weigh them, and then finally make the decision. Many times they're difficult and oftentimes unpopular decisions. When I started at Arizona, there were 5 living former presidents, and I tried to meet with all of those that were in Tucson at least once a month. And Pete Likens, who had been the president a couple of times before me, was still in town, and he had some advice, and we would have great meetings. And John Schaefer, who was president of the University of Arizona at age 37. And Pete said, you know, shared governance is really, really important in all universities, but particularly in the culture at University of Arizona. And you need to consult the faculty. You need to make a decision and then go back and explain the decision you made. So I think it's one of having a vision, an inspirational vision that excites students, faculty, staff, donors, elected officials to be excited about what the university can achieve and can improve. But you need to be able to get support from all of those various stakeholders. And you can't do that without listening to them first and taking seriously their points of view. But at the end, you have to make the decision.
Well, heaven knows there seems to be no end to the challenges and opportunities afforded university presidents. But I'd be curious, what do you perceive to be the most pressing issues facing the academy generally currently?
I think, Bill, it's always when people talk about philosophy, what they're usually talking about is money. The AAU has sort of a quarterly survey that is sent out to the public. And as you know, and most people that would be listening to this podcast know, I'm stating the obvious, higher education is not as valued as it was 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago in the country. And I think that is a big perception problem for us. Governing boards are getting more involved in the operations of the universities, and state legislatures are providing less and less support. So you have to really focus on the finances of the university first and foremost and get that right. And the biggest source of revenue for any university, even Stanford, is going to be student tuition. Even if you've got an $8 billion or $20 billion endowment, you're using the payout of that endowment to make the endowment larger, but invest in strategic, not operational costs. So you've got to make sure you have a good handle on the finances of the university. I think that's first and foremost. And then how we educate our students. I think universities have three primary functions, especially a large public land grant AAU university. One, we need to help our students realize their hopes and dreams so they can go out and make society a better place. Secondly, we need to discover new fundamental knowledge and then translate that knowledge into products, oftentimes commercializable products that make humanity better and the world a better place. And the third is to serve our communities, our states, our nation, and even the world. So those are the three primary things that universities need to do. And certainly embedded in that is a sense of entrepreneurship and innovation. Certainly, I've always talked about, since I came in 2017, I try to think of what the vision for the University of Arizona could be. And just tremendous faculty, as I said before, and enormous research programs. But I think we're in the nascent stages of the fourth industrial revolution, which is really the convergence of physical, biological, and data sciences. And that sounds very techy, and obviously any university, I'm often asked, is that a tech company? Well, every company is a tech company. I mean, Bill, you've become a tech company. You've got to learn how to put this podcast on, and everything we do has some tech embedded in it. But certainly artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms is going to permeate everyday life in every sector. So we have to have our students prepared to go out in a world and have the tools to understand, at least have a working knowledge of how they can use new technologies and innovative approaches to do their jobs better. But there has to be a strong underpinning of the humanities that teach critical thinking, communication, collaborative teamwork, problem solving, and all of that has to be embedded into a curriculum that helps prepare our students to be successful. And the students is what makes the difference in a university, because there are plenty big research institutes and you don't have to have students there. There are plenty of hospitals that just deliver hospital care, which big academic medical centers do. But the students are the things that distinguish you from those other institutions. So that's where our primary focus should be. And we had a strategic plan with almost 100 initiatives. Over half of them were focused on student success.
Speaking of pressing issues, You've had an interesting past 24 months. The university has received a lot of attention since acknowledging a $177 million deficit. I am wondering how you address this issue and what you would advise other presidents who might encounter similar or comparable challenges.
Bill, this is a great question because, as I outlined, the biggest stress on I would say any organization, but in particular universities, large universities, but even the small liberal arts colleges like Millsaps College that I went to, Birmingham Southern had to close its doors, and it was always seen with Sewanee, University of the South, Millsaps, Henderson, those kind of small liberal arts schools, and they're struggling to try to make ends meet. But the large universities like University of Arizona are too, and many others, even the privates. We had a report to our Board of Regents about the finances of the University of Arizona, and they look great. We had a health report card was outstanding. Reported to the regents that we had adequate cash reserves of 150 days cash on hand. Sort of the minimum you would want would be about 140, and that this fiscal year we would see that grow to 160 days cash on hand. We reported a year ago now that what we reported to our regents in May for the November meeting was that we were in good shape and had good health. A year ago, when we made the report, we had to update it, and we had to tell the regents that we didn't have 150 days cash on hand. We had what was projected to be 100 days cash on hand. And at a burn rate of $6 million a day, that was a big miscalculation. We had invested heavily in our strategic plan and helped grow our research program. When I arrived, we had expenditures of about between 500 and 600 million a year, and we hit 980 million and projected to be at about 1.1 billion this year. So we purposefully used some of our reserves to invest in our research enterprise. Moreover, college athletics is a major problem, as you well know. And we were running about a $30 to $40 million a year deficit, thinking that we were going to make the switch from the Pac-12. We thought we were going to get a great media deal with the Pac-12 and it would still be in place. But obviously we had to make the transition to the Big 12, and we didn't get the money that we thought we were going to get to pay back. It was an internal loan to athletics. So all of that came out of reserves, and we still would have been in great shape had we had the money that we thought we had. And the final thing is, through our strategic plan, we invested in trying to recruit the brightest and best students to University of Arizona. So simultaneously, we did away with SAT and ACT scores and counting AP classes and interbaccalaureate programs. And we just said, if you come from high school and you have a 4.0 average, you can come to the University of Arizona tuition free, and we guarantee that for 4 years. I had often thought when I got there that we needed to change that 4-year guarantee policy. But the beauty is, the old wide world of sports program, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, we were suffering from the agony of success, Bill. We grew even through COVID year after year for the whole time I was president at University of Arizona, between 2% and 4% year-on-year growth. So every fall we would get Census Day in sort of October timeframe, and I would say I'm happy to announce that we have the largest entering class at the University of Arizona. We broke last year's record again, 7 years in a row. They're the most qualified, most accomplished, and the most diverse class we've ever had. The problem with that is that we did not set a budget for, let's just say, this last year, we had almost 10,000 new students. The good news is that all these qualified students, these 4.0s, took us up on our offer. And I often say we had an open buffet, an open bar. We didn't have a an accurate RSVP list. We didn't know how many people were going to come and take advantage of the open buffet and open bar. We were actually investing in these great students, but without a budget attached to it. That's something that, cost us between 30 and 40 million a year. So when you get down to it, I immediately sprang into action. We identified that we had shortfalls of this 170 million. I think that was even an overestimation. There were a lot of reports early that it was 240. It was probably in between 120 and 150 million, but it was on a almost $3 billion budget, it was less than 5% of the operating budget, but it was something we needed to deal with. The way we dealt with it was that I took full accountability for this error in projecting how much money we had. And I would say to leaders, immediately find out what the problem is, take responsibility and accountability for it, and act decisively and swiftly. So we had a hiring freeze, we had mandatory cuts. I think the colleges took about a 3% cut. Administration took about a 15% cut. The other thing that I'll just end on is we had a very decentralized administration in terms of business systems, accountability to the central budgeting office, in terms of HR, in terms of IT, and as IT is getting more and more important, we needed to centralize that. So we did all of those things: marketing, communications, fundraising, IT, HR. We got centralization and control of those costs. And the final thing I would say is that everybody did an incredible job of chipping in. They didn't like that we had to go through this, but we immediately cut over $100 million off of this deficit. And we have a plan that this year we'll be back to budget neutral. And the new president then will have the resources necessary to grow the great University of Arizona.
We probably spend too much time talking about issues and challenges and ignore the fact that being the president of a major university offers one of the most gratifying endeavors that one can imagine. As you look back at the 7 years you've spent at the University of Arizona, what are the accomplishments you're most proud of? And what did you find most gratifying during that period of time, Bobby?
Yeah, the most gratifying thing, hands down, without question, 1 through 10, would be the students. No question about it. As I outline what I think we do as universities, the most important thing, we had about over 50,000 students on campus, and with our online students growing with the acquisition of UAGC, University of Arizona Global Campus, our online population is about 25,000 now. The students, by far, are the most important thing. And I think I've said that several times during this conversation. And that gave me the greatest joy of seeing, you're so far removed from the students in many ways. Yet I still had about 25 to 30 students every year that I tried to advise and mentor. Now, most of them, were interested in going to medical school or, something like that. But that was the biggest joy I could have. Going across campus, I was very visible across campus, and I would stop and talk to anybody who wanted to talk to me. I was just at a tailgate at Stanford football game, and a student came up to me and recognized me, had never met me, and we were talking about the University of Arizona and how great their experience was. I would give my cell phone number to everybody in the 7.5 years I was president, gave my personal cell phone to everybody I met. And I always would say to the students in particular or their parents, if there's a problem you've got that you can't get solved, text me or call me, and I will do everything I can to try to help solve your problem. And over the 7.5 years, I probably had 30 or 40 people contact me in that way. Most of the time, they just wanted to come meet with me in my office. But every one of those encounters, they had real problems. They needed somebody to listen to them and help them through the difficult situation they were in. I would say our students and their success, we built a student success district that I think rivals any university in the country. As I said before, our strategic initiatives, we invested a lot of money in student success, and I'm proud to say that our first year retention rate when I arrived was right around 82%, and it's now almost 88%. And that's a lot of hard work by a lot of different people. I'm also glad of the research mission as well, doubling the research expenditures, because I think that's so important to the future of the world, making these new discoveries, and as I said before, translating them into tangible things that make the world a better place. And it's great for economic development locally. The University of Arizona has a tremendous economic impact on the state of Arizona, and certainly on the Southern Arizona economy. And then the work that we did in serving the community and having all the people who love the University of Arizona participate in our Fuel Wonder campaign, which was a $3 billion campaign, and we're very close to getting that closed right now. We've raised over $2.5 billion for that campaign. So those are the things that I'm most proud of, and was happy to be a small part in leading such a great university.
I think you've answered part of my next question, but I was wondering what you would advise, given what we do in terms of recruiting presidents. We're often asked by individuals who aspire to be a president what they should do to position themselves to be a valid, viable candidate for such a role. But what counsel or advice would you give? I know you've mentioned be a good listener, and certainly that should be number one on the list of things these folks should do. But what other thoughts would you share with them, Bobby, if they really did aspire to be a president?
I think be an expert in your field of study. As was often said at Stanford, to get tenure, you had to be at your level of your rank. You needed to be one of the top 2 or 3 people in the world to achieve tenure. So I would say be an eminent scholar, be a leader in your field, focus in on all the things that are necessary to get you to that point of being an international expert in your field. And then I would spend time reading and learning, find mentors who can guide you, who've been through this journey before. I certainly have benefited throughout my entire life from very strong mentors, but you have to go and you have to spend time with them, and you have to find the right mentor that has your best interest at heart. And you need to listen to them and not be impatient. And then finally, I would say be involved as much as you can across trans-university projects. So collaborative things, let's say you're an eminent physicist, find out what's going on in the medical school, the nursing school, the business school, College of Humanities, College of Social and Behavioral Studies. We were one of the leaders. I outlined earlier some of the great programs at University of Arizona, and the College of Optical Sciences is truly a world leader. And we won this big NSF grant for quantum networking. And so that's very technical in terms of quantum computing and quantum science. But quantum networking, think about, the late 70s, early 80s when the internet happened, and the investment that the federal government made into developing the internet that was preceded by 25 years of fundamental scientific discovery. Think of quantum networking and quantum computing as the new, faster, more efficient internet. And we put together a team of incredible quantum scientists and had collaborations between not only the scientists in the College of Optical Science, but engineering in the College of Science with computer science, in the College of Social and Behavioral Scientists, particularly with sociologists, the unintended consequences of all of this great technology and what we need to take into account, the law school, the legal implications of how this new quantum networking will work. So there are going to be opportunities across any university for people who aspire to be provosts, deans, but certainly for presidents, to really understand your university, try to understand other universities, how they differ, and be a good student and do your homework and learn how important those collaborative trans-university interdisciplinary programs would be. The final thing is that, I'm describing into, eminent scholars. And so much of what we do is around our research mission, but teach classes. Understand the hardships of what it's like to go to college. Don't think back 40 years, 30 years ago when you went to college. It's totally different. And the stresses, financial stresses, the social stresses, mental health stresses are paramount. And so I would say teach class, understand what it's like to interact with students, listen to them, try to help them and mentor them. So all of this doesn't apply to a lot of the things that we've seen recently, Bill, with people who have no connection to the academy being promoted to presidents of major universities. But for those who are in the academy and are going to go through the traditional way of being an eminent scholar, a professor, teaching students, understanding the importance of the journey that students make. And then the final one is develop great fundraising skills, because keeping your campus safe is number one. Setting a vision and getting people to be inspired by that vision, but it takes resources. And fundraising is a major part of any president's job. So get experience and learn to love fundraising. I love interacting with people who love the university and getting them excited about investing in the future of what our great universities can do.
I know we're pressing up against our time limit, but I'm curious about your next chapter. Recently, you were named a Distinguished Visiting Fellow at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. What will be your primary areas of interest and focus at the Institute, Bobby?
Yeah, it's great to be back on the farm, Bill. I spent 23 years here, and it's great to be back home in a way. I told Secretary Rice, who's the director of the Hoover Institute, that I really wanted to take time to reflect and do research and have some scholarly contributions around higher education policy, focusing really on finances. We've talked a lot about that today. Around healthcare policy, because as you all know, there can always be more ideas about what we should do to address the healthcare and wellness of not only our country, but the world. And then the final one, which is, not traditionally part of the Hoover's mission, but since Secretary Rice is the director, she liked my third one, which is focusing, and probably the first one I'll focus on, which I've already got a draft of a white paper about the future of intercollegiate athletics in our country. So those will be the three main areas that I'll be working on. And it's such a joy to be back at Stanford, to be able to collaborate and work with many old friends, but also meeting so many brilliant new people who are at the Hoover and across the university. So my sabbatical time won't last long enough. I'm working feverishly to get as much work as I can do over these next several months during my sabbatical to hopefully make a contribution to these three areas of higher education, healthcare, and intercollegiate athletics.
Well, Bobby, I can't thank you enough for taking the time with us today. And I know I'll see you soon, I hope. And but again, I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights and your vast knowledge of the higher education enterprise. I appreciate you.
All right, Bill, thank you. It was a pleasure to spend time with you, and I look forward to seeing you down the road somewhere. I know we'll connect probably in the Metroplex somewhere soon. But you be safe, my friend.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you for joining us on Voices of Leadership, presented by Funk Associates. We invite you to join us again soon as we explore the broad landscape of higher education with the space's leading voices.